This is the Morning Drive. It's Mira Business FM. Coming up, we're going to be talking to Azad Zangana. He is the head of GCC Macroeconomic Analysis at Oxford Economics. It's a question on many people's lips, I think it's fair to say. What's next for the GCC economy? That's next at Mira Business FM.
Mira Business FM, the sound of success.
It's Mira Business FM, the Morning Drive with me, Tim Elliott. The escalating US-Israel-Iran conflict is raising fresh questions about the outlook for Gulf economies, of course. Energy markets are reacting. Financial conditions could tighten further, of course. And sectors like travel and tourism and real estate are watching particularly closely. But what does it all mean for the United Arab Emirates and the wider GCC? With some early insights on what to expect, my guest, Azad Zangana, is the head of GCC Macroeconomic Analysis at Oxford Economics. They're preparing to release their latest regional forecast this week. Azad's with me. Good to meet you.
Thank you. Good to have you.
Very good to have you here. Caveat, first of all, I suppose, Azad, reports like this take time to compile. There's been some tension surrounding the military build-up from some time, for a while, of course. But actual military action has to add an element, I guess, to your outlook. Just broadly to begin with, let's kind of set this. How are recent geopolitical developments shaping the economic outlook here in the GCC right now?
So initially, we had to sit back and think about what are the sectors that are going to be impacted from the disruption that we're seeing at the moment. And so naturally, we had to start making some assumptions about the degree of how serious the disruption is going to be, but also how long this is all going to last. Now, naturally, we're going to be wrong somewhere along the lines, with those assumptions, but we have to make them in order to come up with some of our numbers that, of course, our clients are asking for. So at the moment, we've assumed that the conflict, the most serious part of the conflict, what we're seeing as the blockage to shipping, to travel, most of that will probably last around 2 weeks from the start. So we're a week in. We think it could last another week or so. But we then expect potentially another 6 weeks of sort of tension and low-level disruption continuing for some time. So through that period, you don't see a full recovery in imports and exports and travel and tourism, in day-to-day activity necessarily. And really, we're trying to think about what does this mean for the individual sectors, for all these economies, and also which economies are, how severe is the hit to these economies, because they're actually very different in terms of their levels of exposure.
It's interesting because I'm kind of surprised in a way. I mean, I know, as you say, there is a caveat there in that we can't tell, we can't see the future, we don't know what's going to happen, and you have to make assumptions to offer some kind of guidance almost in a way. But that's a much, I was going to use the word rosy, that's completely the wrong word to use, but that's a more positive outlook than I kind of expected from you.
It's a moving target.
Than I thought.
Yeah, I mean, it's a moving target. And you're right, these things do take time to put together. So, I mean, the team's been working round the clock pretty much since last weekend, and we're only now just about to publish the numbers that we have.
Right.
And, we fully hold our hands up and say, look, if this lasts even longer, then we're going to be revising our numbers naturally. But it gives people a guidance as to the degree of the impact if it's only a 2-week serious conflict. Obviously, if it extends, it becomes worse. But it also gives you guidance about where the impacts are going to hit, which countries are impacted at this moment in time, and which are less impacted.
And I guess in your role, you're used to essentially running numbers, running scenarios, aren't you? So this is an extension of that, an unwelcome extension, but that's simply that's what you do.
It is, but now that it's the central view, we have to spend more time going through all the details of our forecast, because we run very big macroeconomic models to be able to estimate not just GDP, but sectoral bases, international trade. We're part of a big global team of over 450 economists running this service.
Okay, so let's delve in a little bit deeper. Are energy markets responding in a way that materially changes growth expectations for the region?
For the region, it's not really a question about the price of energy at this point in time, because ultimately the price is responding to the inability of these countries to export. So normally, if you ran an oil price shock through our model and oil prices jumped where they are today, $115 per barrel on Brent, that would be good news for the GCC economies. Sure. They're making more money, they're spending more on capital investment and so on. But the reality is that the Strait of Hormuz is effectively closed at this moment in time. Nothing is passing through. And so these countries can't take advantage of the higher prices. This is the real trouble that we're seeing. Now, some countries can avoid the strait. They can use alternative pipelines. Oman, for example, doesn't export through the strait at all. So they're not really impacted. They will benefit from the higher oil price. But the likes of Bahrain, Qatar's in a pretty bad situation, actually. Kuwait as well, to a lesser extent the UAE. They can't just export everything through alternative routes. So at the moment they're taking a hit. They're not able to sell in the usual way. So their energy sectors are struggling at the moment, and they're having to think about closing down production because they're running out of storage facilities, given that they can't export what they're producing.
Yeah. Does higher oil volatility ultimately in the long term hurt or help Gulf economies based on the scenarios that you're running in this report?
It doesn't help. It's volatility in pricing never helps the buyer or the seller. At the end of the day, everybody wants predictability in terms of how much they're going to pay and how much they're going to earn. But also the ability to export, I think, is quite an important factor because we have energy systems around the world geared towards receiving energy from the Gulf. And if suddenly supply is disrupted, they need to start thinking about, well, what are the alternatives here? We saw that a couple of years ago when the Ukraine-Russia war really got going. And suddenly mainland Europe couldn't import energy from Russia anymore. They had to seek alternatives. And that alternative ended up being LNG from Qatar. So you can see how that then led to a huge amount of money being spent on new infrastructure, developing that trade route. It didn't happen overnight. It happened because there was a structural shift in where Europe could import from. Now, we're not saying that this is going to last anywhere near long enough for countries to start thinking, actually, maybe we need to start thinking about where else are we going to get our energy from. But high energy prices and this kind of volatility does lead to producers and people that need to consume this energy start thinking about, well, what are the alternatives when things go wrong? Should we be thinking more about renewables, especially now that the price of oil has jumped so high? The relative price of renewables is even lower today. And it sort of encourages that shift that I think most people are expecting over the very long term.
Yeah. It's not as though there's a tap that you could just switch on and everything can change. Wouldn't that be lovely? Let me ask you about this current environment that we're in. What does that mean for government spending and for fiscal policy across the GCC in those very different markets, as you have already pointed out?
So some of the countries were under a little bit of pressure already, even going into this period. Some of them were running larger, should we say, budget deficits than perhaps expected. Saudi Arabia in particular, Qatar as well, at the end of last year, surprised everybody with a slightly bigger budget deficit there. Now, the attitude has been a little bit different. The Saudis had pretty much said that they're going to try to cut that deficit quite aggressively going into this year. And in doing so, they're also looking to realign some of their spending more towards what the domestic economy needed, as opposed to some of the big Vision 2030 projects that were currently being planned. So we saw some realignment going on there. But put this pressure on as well, they're not going to be able to export as much oil as they'd hoped. So potentially that deficit is going to become even larger this year. They need to think about what are their priorities. Now, there is enough wealth to look through this shock. If this is a 6-month shock, then they could simply just use their reserves and carry on spending pretty much as they planned at the start of this year. But there is always a risk that they may decide, actually, we need to cut back a little bit more in the very near term, just to make sure that there's enough there that there isn't any kind of concern. The one country I would say the markets are a little bit more concerned about is Bahrain, just because more indebted than the rest of the GCC nations. And we have seen a bit of a jump in credit default swaps, which is essentially insurance against defaults on their government debt. Now, it's nowhere near as high as, the likes of a Greek crisis or anything along those lines. We're not at all worried about the situation there, but it was just interesting to see the market react in this way. When suddenly your main source of income is suspended essentially for the time being, yes, of course, there is a little bit of a concern that there may be a risk of a default, even if it is just a low one.
We've seen the disruption to airspace, of course. The UAE in particular is positioned as a tourism hub, a major global hub, to be more precise. How do you view regional tensions affecting travel demand and airline traffic?
It's huge. It's absolutely enormous in terms of the potential impact, not just for the region, but actually around the world. The number of transiting travelers through the Middle East is absolutely enormous. The whole region has really grown as an important hub to enable long-distance travel. So the number of people I know that have been able to make it out to New Zealand, Australia, because their connecting flights can't land in the region is quite significant. So it's a major problem for these countries. I mean, we estimate, we've done quite a lot of work with the World Tourism and Trade Council, and we estimate that for some countries, the contribution from travel and trade is worth up to 15% of GDP. Pretty big, and very sizable, especially for the likes of Qatar and the UAE. Pretty big numbers there. Now, with the travel situation pretty much slow to almost a halt at the moment, of course, there's going to be an immediate negative impact coming through onto these economies. And I guess the bigger question is, well, how long does it last? Because historically, when there has been geopolitical risk in any country, then you don't necessarily see travel and tourism return very quickly. It typically takes 1 or 2 tourism seasons of steady state, everything is okay, before tourism eventually starts to come back. So
sure, there is a confidence here, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. People, who are thinking, where do I book my next holiday? They're booking 6 to 12 months in advance. They're not necessarily booking the next week. And if there is any kind of concern about the region, well, they'll go to Southern Europe, they'll go to elsewhere where that risk just doesn't exist.
There is always I don't want to take the party line, but there is a great deal of truth in the Dubai bounce back factor. We've seen it kind of time and again. How do you, in your position, with your economic helmet on, if you like, how do you account for that kind of, I don't know if there is such a thing as a Dubai factor. It kind of feels as though there is. Do you see where I'm going?
Yeah, maybe, yes. There's
a little
definitely
bit ethereal, a little bit hippy-dippy, I understand, but there's a Dubai factor.
There is a lot of resilience in the economy. I mean, you can see it now where, things are generally still open. Yes, there's work from home orders in place, which has definitely reduced activity in general. Certainly traffic is a lot better now, and pollution is down, which is maybe some of the upside of the current situation. But yes, there is a certain resilience there that would lead you to think that there would be a rebound. And we agree. We expect to see that rebound in domestic activity come through fairly quickly. The international side, I think, will probably struggle a little bit. That's fine. I think that's to be expected, and the economy will have to make do as a result. And then much more longer term, we might see some adverse impact to perhaps international interest in investing in the economy. Maybe not. Certainly there'll be a bit of a risk premium added to investing in the region, I think, going forward.
Okay.
Nothing that's, I think, going to fundamentally change the overall picture. Ultimately, the structural story of the UAE and the wider Gulf is still incredibly strong and attractive. I still think there'll be a lot of capital flowing into the region.
We've covered, I guess, energy. We've covered tourism. Any particular sectors exposed to geopolitical risk at the moment that we haven't covered?
Real estate?
How did I forget? How did I miss that?
How?
That's check myself.
Usually the number one topic that comes up when we're in Dubai.
It is.
I understand why it's not top of people's agendas, and that's understandable. But typically, domestically, when we do see big global events, big hits to confidence, real estate does take a big hit. And that's natural because there's such a big reliance on the demand coming through from expats and overseas investors as well, that when we see these kind of hits, you do typically see a bit of a correction in the local real estate market. We have a lot of supply coming onto the market this year in Dubai in particular. And that has to be a concern for investors, especially in the kind of the 1 and 2 bedroom property segments of the market. So we might see something going on there in terms of a bit of a correction, especially as there is a lot of supply coming on. But the rest of the market, I think, feels reasonably solid. I mean, certainly the commercial real estate side, very high occupation rates, capacity utilization is elevated. Not too concerned about that side for the time being. But like I said, there's going to be a bit of a concern around how protected everybody feels about their capital within the region.
I mean, it's been a particularly good couple of years, certainly the last 2.5 years or so in real estate. And we talk to a lot of real estate people who would probably say there is a correction of sorts coming. How strong a correction it is, we don't know. But let me ask you about foreign investment flows into the region. Still holding up despite tensions?
Impossible to say, to be honest.
Really?
I guess the best barometer we've got is the stock markets. And yet they've taken quite a significant hit. We had a couple of days when the Dubai and Abu Dhabi exchanges were closed, and we had to put some short limits on in order to reopen them to protect it from any kind of big hit. But they are still down quite significantly through this period. So that's to be expected. I think that's very normal in the short term when uncertainty is so high. Investors will trim their exposures to some extent in order to make sure that their portfolios are correctly aligned. But also, of course, if things get worse from here, they need to cover their back. They need to say, yes, well, we did sell some allocation. So naturally, that impact is going to happen. But I don't think it's catastrophic at this point, and it is certainly only a short-term indicator. Long-term investors will behave very differently. They'll be thinking about what is the actual situation on the ground. And as I'm sure you're well aware, Tim, the situation's not that bad here. Nowhere near as bad as other conflicts around the world. In fact, I think if it hadn't been for the lack of traffic, you probably wouldn't know anything is really going on apart from the phone blaring with alerts.
Do you know what's so interesting is the fact that we notice the traffic so much. It's almost belittling the situation, but it is, as you say, it's probably an upside if there is an upside at the moment. There's an element here, I think, of the GCC as a stabilizing anchor of the region. So when you sit back and I have this image of you, Asad, when you're preparing reports like this and thinking things through, that there are moments when you're furiously typing. And then there are moments when it's hands clasped behind the bed and there's behind the back of your head. And you kind of sit back and think for a while and ruminate. When you do that, just allow me the romantic notion of you doing this. Is there a sense that the GCC economy is almost entering a phase where kind of resilience matters more than growth numbers?
In the long term, yes, absolutely. I think the most important thing now is to protect the notion of security, because I think apart from oil and gas and tourism, security is a very important commodity for confidence in the region. Yep. If these governments are going to be successful in terms of diversifying away from oil and gas over the long term, they need to protect that hard-won commodity of security in the region. Now, we know now that security is being questioned given the current situation. They need to make sure that it doesn't get too bad and the response is quick and effective as well, that people and businesses are protected to some extent through this period and the region bounces back very quickly. And ultimately, this isn't totally in the GCC's hands, but how Iran is resolved in terms of the level of security that's achieved, that's ultimately what's going to determine where we land in terms of the future outlook for the region.
The early signs are, I think, in that regard, seem to me to be, they certainly seem to be positive.
I think most people will currently assume that the war will eventually end with Iran being defeated to some extent. What ends up in Iran is up for question. What does the government look like? Is it going to be a situation as we've seen in Libya, for example, post-war, where actually it's just a bunch of factions and chaos there? Or do we get to see something a little bit more stable like Syria at the moment? These are the kind of, I think, questions that people are currently thinking about, because it matters. We were talking about just before the show, we were talking about the apology that came through from Iran, and then suddenly the attacks that followed almost immediately after. That's because there's a lack of control there at the moment. Yeah. And this could get worse. We don't know which fractions could do what, and who's controlling the army, and who's controlling this. So this is what needs to be eventually resolved, both internally and potentially with the influence of external powers as well.
You're releasing new forecasts this week. What should I be watching with interest in the numbers that you're about to release?
Well, let me give you the headline numbers. For the GCC economies in aggregate, we are downgraded our forecast for this year by 1.8 percentage points down to about 2.6% GDP. That's quite a hefty downgrade. Now, for next year, though, we are revising up because we are assuming, therefore, there'll be a rebound fairly quickly coming through. So second half of the year, we see a reasonable rebound, and that accelerates into next year, and we get a lot of catch-up growth, if you will. Within the GCC, the most negatively impacted economies are Qatar, and I would say the UAE as well. Qatar mainly because of its reliance on gas exports.
Sure.
The difficulty there is, whereas oil, you can continue to produce it and then store it and then export it later once the Strait of Hormuz is reopened, gas you can't. It's very expensive to store. And we know from Qatar Energy that they've already started stopping production there. So that production, if you're not producing, that's lost output. That's lost GDP forever, essentially. So they're going to take the biggest hit. The UAE, like I said, they will pare back some of the production. They will export a little bit through alternative pipelines as well. But they have such big exposure to travel and tourism that they're going to take a hit on that side. And again, that will take a long time to recover. Now, the people who are not coming on holiday in the next month or two, they're not going to come twice next year. So again, that's lost output for forever. So those are the worst impacted. The least impacted, as we mentioned earlier, Oman, because they can still export without any issues. And Saudi is less impacted as well, really because they have alternatives in terms of how they're exporting, but also their travel and tourism. Well, their travel hasn't been impacted. Their tourism has. Obviously, people are a bit concerned. But at least logistically, things are operating largely as normal in Saudi.
Two questions, and we've only got about 2 minutes, actually. The next 12 months, the biggest risks, first of all, to the GCC, the economic outlook here in the GCC?
Well, it has to be that the war continues for longer than expected. Because as I said, all of this, the situation all revolves around how long does the conflict continue for and how serious it becomes. It could still escalate further. We could see a situation where Saudi is dragged into this war. For now, they're largely not that impacted. The longer this continues, the greater the impact is going to be on those exporters, especially for oil and gas. But also, I mean, we haven't really talked about this, but the impact on imports as well. For the time being, there are no real shortages of goods, but if you're trying to import something from overseas, at the moment, it's not arriving because obviously the flight situation is disrupted and the strait is closed. But if it was to last for much longer, we could start seeing shortages of certain goods, maybe even food at some point. And that, of course, leads to quite a bit more inflation that we currently expect. We only expect to see a small amount of additional inflation this year, nothing too serious. But like I said, the longer it goes on, that's when we might start to see more issues.
I like the inflation point there. On the flip side, where do you see the biggest opportunities for growth in the region?
Well, I'm hoping that all of this leads to a re-emphasis on the need to diversify away from oil and gas. We've done quite a lot towards tourism, but I think it strengthens the case to think about alternative industries as well. So we know that the GCC economies are, really looking at artificial intelligence and building out the capacities around that. that would be great, I think, because if we had a bit more industry around there, then the impact on GDP from this current situation wouldn't be as severe. So hopefully we will see more concentration, more focus on delivering that diversification.
When's the report out? When are the forecasts out this week?
Forecasts will be sent out to the clients, I think, on the 10th of March. Our report should be coming out in the next couple of days or so.
Okay. Well, we look forward to hearing more about it. Azza Zangana is the head of GCC Macroeconomic Analysis at Oxford Economics, with us at Mira Business FM this morning. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Fascinating, indeed. Mira Business FM, this is The Morning Drive.
Mira Business FM, Dubai's home of business radio. Mira Business FM, where business comes to talk.
It's Mira Business FM. It's the morning drive with me, Tim Elliott. Airports and visas and flight demand. What the ground reality actually shows. Now, travel across the region is facing disruption as the conflict involving the United States, Israel, and Iran is impacting regional airspace. It's forcing airlines to reroute, to cancel flights, perhaps, and it's affecting passengers across major hubs, including the United Arab Emirates. The industry is having to change flight schedules, adjust travel plans in order to adapt to an ever-changing and a rapidly evolving situation as well. So to understand what's going on the ground, what's happening from airport operations and flight availability to visa processing to traveller demand, we're joined by Rahish Babu, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Musafir.com. Rahish, it's good to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Tim. So thank you so much for having me here in your studio. On the Zoom call. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome. So let's start with your perspective, Rahish, in the travel industry. How's the current regional situation affected travel demand in the UAE? First of all.
Yeah, so of course, the travel demand is reduced, or the people are still waiting. What is the current situation? And you know that when the Saturday the war started and the geopolitical reasons, all the flights got cancelled. So people went panic because there was a lot of transit passengers are stuck at the each airport, even Dubai, Abu Dhabi, in Sharjah, because they are having an onward connection. But that people are affected first. Then obviously there was a business travel, family travel. The people also got affected because of the flight cancellation, and the people are having a panic also because sometimes they're having a last day of their visa and they have some kind of emergency travel. Completely there was a uncertainty in that market. But UAE, because we seen in the COVID also, they're very proactive and they will find a solution. If there is any way that they will in this market, it will not completely shut down. So we understood that okay, there was a situation. Then we identified that okay, there is a flight is flying from Muscat, because Muscat airport is not got affected, they are not closed. So there is a immediate traveler or emergency traveler. We have facilitated that people can go to Muscat and they can fly from Muscat to their certain destinations. That was the first. Then slowly in the UAE government also decided they had to started the special corridor, and they given a 30% or a 25 to 30% of the capacity of each airline to operate from the respective UAE airport also. So that was a one of the good news for the emergency travelers. If you can see the current situation, there is a 60 to 70% of the flights are started operating, and people are stuck at here in the transits. Almost you can say the people are already traveled. Now there is a people are booked from the region and they want to do the rebooking or reissue. The options are there, but the regular business travel and the leisure travel, people are still waiting, monitoring the situation, and I'm expecting maybe coming days or weeks they will also start traveling.
What are you seeing on the ground in terms of airport operations and passenger traffic right now, Rahish?
It's a heavy, because there is a heavy passenger traffic is are happening from the each airport. You can see almost all the flights are full. What is the reason for that? Because all the airlines are not started their 100% operation. Still, they have a certain limitation. Certain places, still there is a operations are not resumed, and you can see the European carriers and the US carriers, they are not started the operations. So that's a reason, and there is a lot of people got stuck. So you can see the kind of a call volume. We are managing Fly Dubai GSA office in Sharjah. I can see from the morning the people are standing in the queue for a day change, rebooking, or a rescheduling. Even we are having a Emirates office also. So that currently the travel demand is very high, maybe because of the supply wise demand, because all the airlines are not receiving their 100%. Once that is done, definitely it is going to reduce.
It's not 100% yet, but how have flight schedules stabilized? To what extent are airlines still adjusting routes and capacity because of restrictions in terms of airspace?
Yeah, for a airline perspective also, it's not easy, because suppose if one airline is operating 15 daily departures from a Dubai airport, if they are having a certain disturbance or a certain cancellation for reinstating the flight, it's not easy, because they have to carry whoever is their existing bookers and whoever is the new bookers. So they have to adjust, and plus they're affected the slots also. Maybe some airlines, they have a domestic and international, so everything has got affected. Plus now, right now, what happened, the capacity was given by previously 30%, now it came to 60 to 70%. So they have to adjust accordingly. So the demand and the people are, because we are always advising the people, there is no panic situation here. If you have if you don't have emergency travel, okay, maybe you can travel after a couple of days also, because airlines are going to resume. Now you can see last 2 days everything got stabilized. We didn't see any kind of the mass cancellation or any flight. The schedules are okay. There is a slight delay, but there is no like a 5 hours, 6 hours delay. No, it's now last 2 days things are very much stabilized.
I was going to ask you about cancellations, how airlines and travel companies manage cancellations, how bookings, rebookings are managed, and how passenger itinerary changes are handled, particularly at a time like this, Raish.
Yeah, so basically, because there is any kind of that situation, if airlines are cancelled, automatically their booking also cancelled. But good part is airline and travel agency people will allow to rebook, reissue for a next availability date without any kind of a fee. So the either passenger, what they can do, they can visit the travel agency, they will help you for a rebooking, reissuance. Otherwise, they can visit the airline direct offices or a call center. So they will allow, because whatever the next date they can they want to travel, so they can do the rebooking or a reissuance without any kind of a penalty.
What kinds of things are you seeing in terms of traveller behaviour? What kinds of trends are emerging since the conflict escalated? Are you seeing people postponing trips? Are people choosing different destinations?
So for a leisure, people are still waiting, because we having a huge group movement during the Eid, but we didn't get any kind of a mass cancellation. When we are having a discussion with the people, they told, okay, maybe we'll wait the situation, and even airlines are also ready to support. Okay, they also asked us to wait a couple of days more, and everyone is having a very that positive expectation that things will be back normal, and they're ready to travel. So leisure business. For a business travel, we are saying same thing, because the people want to wait, but there is a certain people are stuck, and the visiting visitors, they want to go back to their home country immediately. That people are right now traveling a lot. Plus there is a lot of people, they want to go to their home country, maybe not because of the situation, because of the school holidays. So their people are, because they have a plan this trip maybe by December, January. Now I think they are also having a option that they can travel back to their home country. So we are getting their request to do the rebooking and reissuance.
And of course, school holidays were brought forward by a week. What impact did that have?
Yeah, so basically, there is a early summer vacation started. Now people are having till 30th. There is a schools are holiday year. So even the families are ready to travel. So we are getting a request from the family also for enquiring to go back to there. So I don't think so, because the people that lost that confidence, or they are having a big scale. I don't think so. People are willing to travel. They are not. They are not stopping their travel because of the current situation. And last 2 days, because of this stabilization, and there is no cancellation from the airline, I think people confidence is increasing. And because it's a UAE is a very trade dependent, and so for that, even the companies also required a lot of travel. Plus there is a companies having a lot of projects are happening. No projects are stopping, so they want people for that project. So the people are bringing the people also, and a lot of people are traveling also. I think the confidence level last 2 days, I can say, is very much high.
Which is good to hear. Are certain travel corridors or maybe destinations more affected than others at the moment?
No, if you can see the region, because UAE basically, if it is a, if I can comparing to Doha, still the flights are not yet 100% open. Only there is a special flights are operated by Qatar Airways. No other flights are going there. If you coming back to Kuwait, it's affected. And plus airlines, what they did, they opened first the normal destination rather than the leisure destination. If you can see, going to Krabi or Tbilisi, these are the leisure destination. Still, airlines are not open that route, because they are believing that, okay, maybe more people are traveling to their normal destination compared to leisure. So, but we are expecting maybe coming next week, they will open the leisure destinations also.
What's been the impact? You mentioned passengers transiting earlier after the immediate aftermath of the tensions escalating. What's been the impact on connecting passengers who normally transit through the hubs like Dubai or Abu Dhabi?
Yeah, normally there will be a decline in the transit passengers, but team, you have to understand basically the people. Suppose the people are stuck in India, if they want to go to any kind of a European countries, so normally people will take a via Dubai or Abu Dhabi. Right now, they are preferring the direct from their respective home countries, but same time there is a availability and the demand, so the seat capacity of a direct airline from their that respective countries, because the kind of Emirates and Etihad is take the capacity, no one can beat that. So I'm sure people, and plus a lot of people are feeling that, okay, Dubai is the one of the safest. So that demand definitely is going to increase in coming days, the transit passengers also.
What's the current situation with visa processing and travel documentation for people planning trips from the UAE, Rahish?
Yeah, so two things happen, because one is the inbound passengers, they are on a UAE tourist visa and their date is expiring. So government given a facility that, okay, there is no overstay fines because of the current situation. So that was the one of the very positive news for the people, because they were panicking that, okay, if I'm not traveling, I have to pay the overstay fines. But the UAE government is very kind enough, so they have facilitated that service. The second, for outbound services, because VFS, normally if you are depending on a VFS for a Shenzhen or any other countries, the couple of days VFS was off, but by Wednesday they have also resumed their operations. So when we having a discussion with the VFS also, what they're saying that, okay, if you have a Monday, Tuesday, if you lost the appointment, don't worry, they are discussing with the embassies for a next available slots. They will call customer directly and will inform, okay, you lost this slot, but this is your current date. So now slowly for that visa facilitation for outbound also started now.
Um,
But there will be
Go
there will
on.
be I'm sure because of there is a lot of people got cancelled first 1 week, so they will get what will be the next appointment that we can, no one can guarantee that if will be impacting, because suppose if they plan for during the Eid vacations, this time we are seeing there is a lot of people are traveling to Japan on during Eid holidays,
Mm.
and Japan getting appointment is also difficult. But there is a lot of people pre-booked the Japan appointments because of the current situation. They lost the that their original date. Now maybe they will get a maybe the postponed dates maybe in coming weeks, that customers going to impact because maybe they can't travel during the Eid holidays.
Yeah, for sure. Are you finding travelers booking more flexible tickets, or is there an uptick in insurance, given the uncertainty around flights?
Yes, of course. So basically, now people are opting for a value or a flexible tickets. If that last 2 3 days that was the trend, people want to make sure because they don't want to lose if there is any kind of a cancellation. And we are getting a passengers call. Sorry, the passengers request for a insurance also.
What kind of guidance? Here's the tip question, Rahesh. What guidance are travel companies giving to customers who have trips planned in the near future?
So basically, we are asking if there is any new bookings. We are asking the people go for a flexible ticket and take a small insurance, because that will be added advantage for you. Because currently we know that situations are stabilizing, but we don't know what is going to happen. So we are expecting everything will be back to normal. But as a if you are paying a little bit extra for a flexible or a insurance, because at least you will have a peace of mind. So
Mm.
plus what we are telling the people before traveling to airport, you make sure either from the website or either from your travel agent, okay, all the flights are going on time. And travel agent like us, we are getting because we are collecting every day travel updates also, what is exactly happening nearby our countries and what is kind of a flight operations. So we have a regular travel updates because we are taking from each sources. So consult with your travel consultant before you are going to the airport or going to stack, and make sure that okay, your flights are departing on time, and wherever you are going there is no any kind of restrictions are there.
It's a tough time. It's a more trying time at the moment, obviously. But from your perspective, what are the biggest operational challenges at a time like now?
The biggest operational challenge, the kind of a queries we are getting from our customer for a rebooking for their existing flights. So certain sometime what will be have to happen, we have to call the airline to check for the next availability options, or because if we can find from the system, but certain cases, the tickets are not issued with us. We don't have a permission to do the day change, but we want to help the people, so we will call the airline directly to do that. So the kind of emails and queries we are getting for a rebooking reassurance, our operation people are facing, because they have to extend their working hours even during Ramadan also to support our customers.
Um, Rahesh, can I just ask you for an observation? It strikes me, it's a very positive picture, much more positive picture than I imagined. It's what I'd hoped for, to be honest. That's what you're painting this morning. But it kind of points to me that the UAE, there's a certain level of, we're using this word again, resilience as a global travel hub that we're seeing. When you get disruptions like this, we can't account for a situation like this. But the resilience is impressive.
Of course, so that is the basically what team. What exactly happened? Even complete. Okay, there is a general guidance from the civil aviation to each airport that okay, there is a restriction for a flight departures. We got a call from a Fujairah airport. Okay, Fujairah is also part of UAE. So Fujairah said okay, they have some kind of a exception from a UAE government because Fujairah it's not because close to the Oman vicinity and it's open, so we can have a flight operation from a Fujairah the airport. So that was a very positive thing. So immediately we thought, okay, we can work out from a Fujairah, so the people are having an option to travel from a Fujairah also. So immediately we have a put a repatriation flight from to India, and we had a flight to Fujairah, Muscat, and Muscat beyond. So that was the government. It's not a completely even during COVID or during this current scenario. As a UAE government or a UAE, the people not to have a big panic because some option or a some kind of a because of the multiple airports are there and they will evaluate where is the safety security and they have opened also. Then immediately they opened the main hub airport like Dubai. So compared to any other the regional countries, I think we are very blessed because we are staying in UAE.
Final question for you, Rahesh. What indicators will be really clear, really apparent that the regional travel market is really back at an effective stabilization point?
So because it's a very tough question because what happened because of the regional travel, because if you compare to UAE, okay, UAE is open for that, but there is a still restriction in Qatar, there is a still restriction in Jordan, the Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq. So the region still the flights are not operating. So unless until there is no amicable solution from the current Iran and the US or Israel, the war, I don't think so because that going to be materialized because still there is a people are planned to go to these countries also. They are struggling to travel. So the world is open for others, but still these regional countries are still impacted. So I'm hoping or praying that okay, maybe in a coming weeks they will also get an option to travel back to their home countries.
Let's hope so, indeed. Rahesh Babu is the Chief Operating Officer of Musafir.com. Rahesh, great to talk to you. Appreciate your time and thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you. Thank you so much.
This is Mira Business FM and it is The Morning Drive.
Mira Business FM. The sound of success.
This is The Morning Drive. It's Mira Business FM. My name's Tim Elliott. Welcome to the show. Coming up, here's a statement I didn't think I would be making today. Brain cells from urine. I know what you're thinking. It's a neurotech breakthrough that could cure or help cure brain disorders. The details of that next here at Mira Business FM.
Mira Business FM, Dubai's home of business radio.
Mira Business FM with me, Tim Elliott. Good morning to you. Imagine if doctors could study your brain without ever touching it. What if a simple urine sample could help scientists grow brain cells in a lab? Two questions. And that's exactly the idea behind Weekday and Beyond. I'm getting ahead of myself. It's a neurotech company developing what's known as brain-on-a-chip technology, and researchers can take cells from a patient's urine, program them into stem cells, and grow patient-derived brain tissue to study neurological and psychiatric disorders and test new drugs. It is fascinating. The CEO of Weekday and Beyond is Nissim Perez, joins us over Zoom now. Nissim, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you for inviting me. How are you?
Good, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Look, we'll get to explaining how the technology works and what it could mean for the future of brain medicine. Can I begin, however, with your platform? You want to rethink drug development in the realm of neurological and psychiatric disorders. Traditional drug development methods are failing us, you say. Animal models don't often predict human outcomes accurately. But what was really astonishing to me, I was looking at your website earlier, was this. 3.4 billion people are affected by neurological and psychiatric disorders globally. That's just over 43% of the global population. That's an astonishing figure, Nissim.
Yes, when you combine all the, I would say, spectrum of neurological and psychiatric disorders, from epilepsy, autism, schizophrenia, and up to neurological and degenerative disorders such as Alzheimer's, dementia, and Parkinson's, you get huge numbers of people that are affected from neurological and psychiatric disorders. So basically, it's a problem of what we call the central nervous system, but we are focusing on the brain, not on the spinal cord, for example. So it's a huge number of people that are struggling with the neuropsychiatric disorders or neurological disorders without a suitable treatment.
Almost half of us. I mean, the other thing you note is that 95% of drugs developed on mice fail in human clinical trials. We've seen just 5 new Federal and Drug Administration FDA-approved drugs for neurological and psychiatric disorders approved in the last 20 years. Less than a 1% success rate in translating preclinical studies to clinical trials. So we need to predict drug efficacy earlier in development. We need to reduce failures in human trials, and we need to accelerate drug discovery. We, in a word, have to do better.
Yeah, so that's exactly true. The process of developing drug and getting into a translation to the clinic is very long and complicated. It starts from the preclinical studies or the preclinical trials. Usually it is done on mice or rats or other animal models. Once you get efficacy and safety in these models, in the mice or rats or other animals, then start a long journey that usually the pharma companies are leading it to take this innovative drug and to go translate it into humans. It starts with phase 1, which is usually been done on control patients, not on the patients themselves, just on healthy volunteers for safety purposes. And then the efficacy of humans is done into trials. This is what happens usually in United States, in Europe, in other places with high regulation. The whole process, phase 1, then phase 2, then phase 3, can take up to even 15 years. $1 billion or more dollars in average for the development of new drug from end to end. And after this, let's say 10 or 15 years, $1 billion, you get the results, okay? And this is the first time that you see if your drug, it's not the first time that you know you have the second phase before, but after the first phase, the third phase, you will know if your drug will be approved in the United States, in Europe, in other markets. So basically, when you start this journey, you have no idea if you're going to end up with a drug. What you do know that it was quite successful most of the times on mice and rats. Otherwise, you wouldn't take all this risk. And the problem is that animal testings, especially in the fields of neurological and psychiatric, in the brain field, are a poor predictor, a very poor predictor to the final success after the clinical trials in human. As a matter of fact, they are not only a poor predictor, they do the opposite. Mice and rats usually respond much better to drugs that humans just don't respond to them, and vice versa. If you have a drug that mice did not respond, so you drop it and you're not continuing with this to the clinical trials, but maybe humans would react to this drug quite efficiently. So we have a problem here. And at Itai and Beyond, this is the problem that we are asserting, basically. How to better predict if a new drug, or even existing drug, if you want to do repurposing for a drug, let's say that you want to take a drug for epilepsy and to test it on autism, okay? So instead of doing the trials, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 on and start with mice, you can start with the actual tissue of the patients that you would like to test the drugs on it.
Understood. So let's talk a little bit about the technology. How can a simple urine sample become brain cells in a laboratory?
So this story basically goes back to around 2002, when a brilliant scientist named Shinya Yamanaka showed to the world for the first time that cells can be reprogrammed, which means that you can take any type of cell. It can be a skin cell from the mouth, from the liver, whatever, and to reprogram it back to what a state we call a stem cell. We all start our life as a form of a stem cell, embryonic fertilized eggs. And from there, we have the potential to become a human being with all the system, with the brain, with the lungs, with the heart, everything is there. So once you have a stem cell, you can basically have the potential to differentiate it to any type of other cell. So Shinya Yamanaka showed in 2002 that it can be done, and it also got a Nobel Prize on it. But that was a basic science, that presenting that you can take a cell from the body, transform it back to a stem cell, and then to go and differentiate it to any other type of cell. It is done scientifically using different types of molecules and procedures, but it works perfectly fine. So you end up with a cell or a tissue that you could not have access to without a biopsy. For example, you can take a skin cell and in the lab transform it into a stem cell and then to a brain cell. The recent development show that you don't need to go from cell to embryonic cell to another cell. You can go from embryonic cell to a tissue. It's called, in professional terms, organoids. So organoids are basically a small tissue, 3D, functional, and keeping the original biology of the patient. That it's a lab grown basically. So what we're doing at Itai and Beyond, we found a way to basically take cells from urine, okay, from patients' urine.
Mm-hmm.
Every time you give a urine, you have cells from the, usually from the liver sometimes, or from the skin inside, they're called epithelial cells, that you have them in the urine and they can survive for a few, sometimes hours. So we found a way to keep them alive and non-invasively, basically, to have an access to cells in your body, not a biopsy from the skin even. And once we have from urine sample to biopsy, the road to get a brain tissue is already familiar by science. So we take these cells from the urine and we transform them to stem cells and then to brain tissues of the patients themselves. From each urine sample, we can have basically endless brain tissues because the stem cells are dividing. So you can split them as much as you want, and then to have 100 or 1,000 brain tissues of the same patient. Okay.
It's remarkable. But what exactly is brain on a chip technology, Nissim, and how does that work?
So the next step, once we have the brain tissue of a person, the question is, what are you doing with it? How do you know that a brain tissue in the lab, a lab-grown brain tissue of a patient, will respond or not respond to a specific drug or a compound or a process? Okay, so the next stage we did is to take it to the technological, I would say, world, that we place this lab-grown brain tissues on what we call multi-electrode array. So a multi-electrode array, imagine just some kind of a dense electrodes in the square, okay? And you put the miniature brain tissue on them, and what happens is that the electrodes are connected to a computer, and they constantly recording and stimulating the brain in a technology that we call a closed loop. So it's a direct interaction between a brain and a patient-derived lab-grown brain tissue. Okay, it's a direct interaction. Once you have this interaction, you can do amazing stuff. You can teach this lab-grown brain tissue to respond to stimulations and also to do things. For example, as you can see in our website, we taught the lab-grown brain tissues to play a simple computer game. So this basically provides us the ability to test drugs and compounds in aspects of learning, of attention, of memory, of a signal processing of a brain tissue in the lab. That's what we do. And the next step is to put a drug and to see if it's improving the results. For example, when we take the urine and transform it into brain tissue from patients with autism, and we compare the results in this simulation, in this, like, for example, the game simulation, okay, to patients with without autism, a control patient, healthy, we see the difference. We just see it in the lab. The lab-grown brain tissues derived from autism patients or from patients with epilepsy or other are not as good performers in the task in the lab as the control. So this generates a model, a delta, a difference that you can work with. Once you have this, you can take different drugs and to see what happens once you give the drug to the brain organoid. If it improves memory, it can, from patients with dementia, it can be targeted or marked as a drug for Alzheimer. If it can improve attention or I would say some kind of features in autism, then you can simulate it, see the difference, and mark this compound as a potential drug for autism, for example. This is how it's done in our lab, and it's basically called drug screening. A lot of companies are doing it, but each one have its own technology. And our technology is a patient-derived lab-grown brain tissues that provide us the functional readout instead of mice, for example.
So how closely do lab-grown brain tissues resemble real human brain cells?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. In the cellular level, they are very similar. So in the lab-grown brain tissue, we have neurons and astrocytes and other type of cells that are almost perfectly matched to the cells in the real brain. So if you compare a cell from the real brain to a cell in the lab-grown brain tissue, they are quite alike. There are some differences that science knows about, and we are, always improving it to be perfectly aligned. That's the one thing. When you compare the whole brain, which is like have, let's say, over 86 billion neurons, which are the most important cells for computation in the brain. So we have only 10 million of them. So it's much smaller. And we don't have all the, all the different pieces of the brain. We have just a small miniature, let's say, singular a part of the brain, prefrontal cortex or hippocampus, whatever we choose to differentiate to. So what you basically get, it's like imagine that from the brain of a patient, you have a biopsy of a specific part of it, let's say the frontal cortex. It's important because most of the I would say neurological and psychiatric disorders start from a known location in the brain. For example, we know that dementia usually starts from the hippocampus, and psychiatric disorders such as autism and schizophrenia usually starts from the prefrontal cortex. So we can choose the area that we want to differentiate the cells into, and then we have like a small biopsy of it. The next step, and this is what we are working on at the time beyond in the lab, is you can take many different brain areas to grow them together to get like a miniature brain which contains 4 or 5 different areas of the brain. This is also something that can be done. Still, there are lots of challenges. Obviously, we don't have a blood flow in the lab-grown brain tissue, and you don't have the complete person. You don't have like the immune system from the body and the heart and all the metabolism. There are challenges, but in I would say a general point of view, it's something remarkable that today we can have an access to a brain tissue without even touching the patient itself. And this brain tissue simulates in many aspects the real brain of, or at least part of them, of the patients themselves.
And non-invasive access as well, potentially. Look, I have to be honest with you, your website was very science fiction to a brain like mine, Nissim. Human-derived mini brains meet cutting-edge AI. It's an amazing read. How can this technology, in simple terms, help scientists test drugs more effectively than the traditional methods that we were talking about earlier?
So yeah, as I explained, once you have the technology and you have a validated model, which you see that patients are different in some aspects than controlled, than healthy people, then you can test drugs that can help predict better the success. Let's say that you want to develop a drug for diabetes, okay? So what you need is a model. You need to see that if you take a blood sample of patients with diabetes and patients without diabetes, you get different sugar levels, okay, different glucose level, and once you have the different glucose level and it matches, the higher are from the patient with diabetes, the lower are from control patients, then you have a model, and then you can test drugs that just normalize the levels of sugar in the blood. Exactly this what was missing in neurology and psychiatry. Exactly this, a model, a validated model. Mice models and rat model did not work. We managed to show, and we have also a new scientific paper published in a luxurious journal of Nature's Translational Psychiatry, that shows that not only that in our system can blindly differentiate between patients with autism or epilepsy to control patients, a healthy patient, it also shows difference between the subgroup of autism, for example. So when you take different types of autism patients, they are known. I'm not going to get into it, but there are different subclusters of autism that are genetically characterized or according to their symptoms. Our system, together with the AI that you mentioned and the closed loop reinforcement learning that we do to the brain tissues, can differentiate between the different subpopulations of the patient. It doesn't only say that, okay, this person has severe autism. It can say this person has severe autism, which is similar to a Phelan-McDermid syndrome more than a Green-to-B syndrome, for example, which is a quite remarkable, I would say, finding. It's very sensitive, so it makes the model very validated, and it can help pharma companies, hospitals, academia research to better test the drugs and compounds. As a matter of fact, we also have our own pipeline of drugs and compounds that we are developing in our labs at Italy and beyond, and we test them on our system. And the best ones, we just write a proprietary defense on them, and then we can offer them to start joint development with pharma companies, and this is basically what our company is doing at those days.
I'm interested, Nissim, on the neurological and psychiatric conditions that you're focusing on. How has that shaped the company's mission?
So the story, and it goes to the name of our company, Itai and Beyond. The story was when I finished my PhD in neuroscience. I was studying something totally different, not totally, but something different in the field of drug development. Development of nanocarrier, nanoparticles, as treatment for neurological and psychiatric disorders, including spinal cord injuries, on different mice models, because that was what available. So I studied different type of mice that are genetically modified to have different type of neurological and psychiatric disorders, and I tested the nanoparticles that we developed in my PhD, that we worked with them on them, and I published a paper on a specific project that was on mice with autism. I'm not going to go into it, but you can generate mice with autism by altering their genes, okay? And someone, which is a successful high-tech entrepreneur, saw this paper and came to me after I finished my PhD. And this person have a son named Itai, and Itai has a low-functioning autism spectrum disorders. And his mission was, let's start a company with his, with his first funding, and let's develop something that science don't have yet, a way to, I would say, to test different drugs and compounds on a specific patient, like his son, without touching the patient itself. Because one of the problems that this family had, and a lot of families with a children or a sibling with a neuropsychiatric disorder, is that you try the drugs on the patient itself, and most of the drugs are doing worse than better. So you just you want to avoid it, and in some cases, especially in severe function, you rather sometimes to avoid the trial and error and do nothing. And if you had a tool, a simulation tool in the lab that you can test there and only then give to the patient itself, then you can basically save a lot of I would say suffering from the patient and from the family. So that was the mission, and I said, okay, let's do it. The nanoparticles that I studied in the PhD are not a suitable, a suitable science for it, but I can do something else. I can, grow a lab-grown brain tissue. It's still new. We're talking about 2021. It was still very new. It was still very cutting edge. So we didn't have most of the scientific protocols and most of the I would say the method. We needed to develop a lot of them, but science are moving quite fast. So I took in account that once we will have something in our mind, so it's most of the problems will be solved in our lab or in other lab, and we can just adapt some of the results, and that's what happened. We solved a lot of problems, and we got a lot of progress in this field, as well as other people that were reporting their findings. So we adapted it, and eventually we end up in a system for neuropsychiatric drug system. And the next step, we wanted to test if it can be suitable for other type of neurological disorders. So we started taking not from psychiatric patients, but also from neurological patients, for example, epilepsy, when we saw that our system can also help with this. So it's a company started with a personal mission of parents that wanted to help their son with his autistic spectrum disorder, and got into, I would say, much wider mission to help humankind with developing neurological and psychiatric disorders.
Well, it's interesting there. So it comes from this a very personal place, and you're still in a very personal place, aren't you? Could your approach help speed up development for treatments for things like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, for example?
Yeah, so and that's exactly what we're doing.
Right.
Once we had expanded the platform from from Itai itself to other patients in autism, and then other patients with epilepsy, and now we are also testing some. We have some preliminary testings on other patients as well from other disorders. Then Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson are the next targets. So we want to show that our platform, our brain on a chip technology, can basically provide a wide solution for predicting the efficacy of drugs before the clinical trials, and to help pharma companies together with us to develop the next generation of drugs and compounds. It's very important to say also to point it that it's not only for drug development together with pharma companies. We are also working together with hospitals that wants to implement our technology for the manner of personalized medicine in the departments. For example, a Department of Children's neurology and disorders with epilepsy has suggested us a joint development to see if they can better match their patients a drug instead of the trial and error, because in epilepsy you have several drugs, like 20 drugs, and the doctor usually do trial and error at the beginning. It takes a few months, and then he knows if the seizures were worse or better, and then he starts the treatment. And it's a long process. And the problem is that if you give the wrong drug, it can do a damage that other when you give the right drug after, it doesn't work quite good as if it was the first attempt. So you can take it to the lab to test it on several brain organoids of the same patient, and then to know what he's responsive to. So it can go also to personalized medicine. And the truth is that it even can go much wider and beyond not only the medicine field. At Itai and beyond, we are also developing new models for AI and based on neuronal networks abilities. Don't forget that all the everything that we see right now, all the explosion of ChatGPT and Gemini and everything is based on a mathematics that called neuronal networks. Neural networks are basically the imitation of our mathematics in the brain. So what we are showing, and we also have, I would say, first collaborations with big technological companies that are developing AI models, we can show that like the brain that can do many computations in a very efficient way, our lab-grown brain tissue is basically a living neuronal network processor, and it can use to help understand how to better implement and better develop AI algorithms. For example, we have these kinds of projects as well in much efficient, energy efficient way. So basically, once you have a lab-grown brain tissue connected to a computer in the lab, medicine is what we say the beginning. It's an important mission. It's one of our most important mission, but it's the beginning. We can take it even farther and farther. And the interest in Itai and beyond and our technology has become so widespread that we really get, offers from around the world, from pharma companies and from technological companies to develop drugs or even to develop technologies, other technologies. And since we are, very R&D oriented and very cutting-edge science oriented and IP, we take these challenges not as defocusing, but as a platform, a single platform that can do a lot of things. So our company basically have the ability to take exactly the same technology and to just implement it so easily to different type of projects, different type of disorders. We are not limited. I think this is one of the most successful models that we could work on as a biotech company to show that we have potential much beyond. Not only scientifically, but also in our business model, in the I would say the future of the company can go to a lot of directions, and it has huge potential.
It sounds as close as anything I've ever heard to being the biological link. It's certainly biological computing, potentially, isn't it?
Yeah, we've shown it.
Yeah.
And again, we are not the only one in the world that doing this, but we are at the cutting edge of this field that is now emerging as a field that called organoid intelligence. So you have like artificial intelligence, for example, and you have processors, and you have chips, and you have everything that NVIDIA and Google are working on in the hardware level. Organoid intelligence is a new field that presents the ability of brain organoids in a lab to have a computational ability which is remarkable. Not in all the missions, but there are some computational missions that brain organoids in our lab and also in science, in other academic institutes, have shown to surpass their abilities much higher and faster at the efficacy and the energy efficient in comparison to a normal computer. And these missions, computational missions, are complicated missions, and they can be used as the next generation of computational, I would say, models for AI, for machine learning, that can save a lot of trouble in the future. If you imagine a future that you can use AI that today is taking lots of, I would say, even the Earth abilities or resources to maintain the energy that needed to sustain the ChatGPT and the Gemini. And if you could do it with much more efficient way from a lab-grown brain tissue, you would grow your processor and not just make them in a lab. That's a whole new vision of energy efficient models for AI and machine learning and everything in the future that we will need to cope with the energetic barrier that we are about to face. That's a very important topic.
It is. It's a remarkable conversation. Nissim Peretz is the CEO of ITE and Beyond, joining us on Mira Business FM this morning. Nissim, fascinating to talk to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Thank you, and have a great day.
And you. Thank you, sir. This is Mira Business FM.
Mira Business FM, Dubai's home of business radio.
It's the morning drive. That was the morning drive for this morning. Don't forget to stay updated across social media with Mira Business FM and the website mirabusiness.fm. You can also find us on WhatsApp. Just look for the Mira Business FM WhatsApp channel as well. And a reminder once again that everything we do is available across social media, streams live on YouTube, lives on YouTube, and is also podcast. So just search Mira Business FM wherever you get your podcasts from.
Mira Business FM, where business